Distinguished senators, the chamber is ready for business now. The chamber is ready for business. Distinguished senators, please resume your seats. The chamber is ready for business. There are some elders there that I cannot mention their names.
Okay. Distinguished colleagues, the Senate, in a closed session, deliberated on matters relevant to the workings of the Senate in particular and the National Assembly in general. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the closed session? Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the closed session? Let me quickly make two announcements that just came in from the villa. One, distinguished Senate President Godswill Akpabio GCON, President of the Senate, National Assembly Complex, distinguished Senate President, confirmation of appointment of members of the Governing Board of the Code of Conduct Bureau in accordance with the provisions of sections 154, subsection 1, and paragraph 1A and B of part 1 to the test schedule of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended. I am pleased to present for confirmation by the Senate the appointments of underlisted 3 nominees as members of the Code of Conduct Bureau. Fatai Ibikunle, these people are representing their zones. Southwest Zone, Mr. Kenneth Ikpeme, South Zone, Justice Ibrahim Buba, Northeast Zone. While it is my hope that the Senate will consider and confirm the nominees in the usual expeditious manner, please accept, distinguished Senate President, distinguished senators, the assurances of my best regards. Yours sincerely, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President, Commander-in-Chief, Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Senator Agadaga. Senator Benson, resume your seat. Pass.
This is referred to the Committee on Special Duties to revert to the Senate within 1 week. Second correspondence from the Villa. Distinguished Senate President, confirmation of appointments of members of the Police Service Commission. Again, representing their zones. In accordance with the provisions of Section 154, subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended, I am pleased to present for confirmation by the Senate the appointments of the underlisted 4 nominees as members of the Police Service Commission. 1. Deputy Inspector General of Police, Buba Ringim, retired member. Honorable Justice Adamu Paul Kalumje, JSC, member. Christine Ladi Dabub, member. Abdul Fatai Mohammed, member. While it is my hope that the Senate will consider and confirm the nominees in the usual expeditious manner, please accept, distinguished Senate President, the assurances of my highest consideration and personal regards. Yours sincerely, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President, Commander-in-Chief, Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria. This is referred to the Committee on Police Affairs to revert to the Senate within 1 week. In respect of the Code of Conduct screening, it will be handled not by the Committee on Special Duties, but by the committee neither the Code of Conduct, membership, and nominations. The screening and clearance hereby referred to the Committee on Ethics, Code of Conduct, and Public Petition to revert to the Senate within 1 week. A short announcement on meeting of members of the Northern Senators Forum from Senator Yaradua Abdulaziz Musa happening today in room 301 after the plenary. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the first to the fourth order of the day will be the second reading of executive bills standing in my name on tax reforms, SBs 583, 584, 585, and 586. Distinguished senators will recall that these bills were read for the first time in this chamber on Wednesday, 30th October 2024. Mr. President, for this purpose, I'm rising to move that these bills be read the second time. And Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, in support of my motion for the reading of this bill for the second time, I stand most respectfully to present the lead debate. Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, once again, I request that you permit me to lead the debate on the general principles of the Joint Revenue Board of Nigeria Establishment Bill 2024, SB 583, the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill 2024, SB 58584, the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill 2024, SB 585, and the Nigeria Tax Bill 2024, SB 586. The Nigeria Tax Reforms Bill is a significant move to overhaul the country's tax system. These bills aim to simplify the tax landscape, reduce the burden on small business, and streamline how taxes are collected. In broad terms, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the four bills seek to ensure uniformity in tax revenue administration in Nigeria in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, eliminate the incidence of double taxation across the country, deploy taxation as a tool to encourage private sector investments in critical industries, and boost individual disposal incomes through targeted tax exemptions as captured in the various bills. In the area of tax exemptions,
Order, please. Senator Zangondora, resume your seat.
In the area of tax exemptions, there is a proposal to exempt those whose salaries are not more than the minimum wage from the pay-as-you-earn deductions, while small businesses with annual turnover of 50 million naira or less are equally exempted from payment of taxes. Similarly, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, there is proposed huge reduction in company income tax from the current 30% to 25% by 2026 as part of deliberate attempt to curtail the incidence of double taxation and multiplicity of taxes and levies. Multiple taxes hitherto paid by companies under various tax heads, namely 2.5% education tax, 0.25% Naseni tax, have been harmonized into a development levy of 2%, which by the year 2030 will be applied to fund the newly established student loan scheme, which will benefit many Nigerian youths. Furthermore, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, unlike what is obtainable under the existing tax regime, whereby the federal government takes a lion's share of the value-added tax revenues, it is proposed that the sharing formula should allow state governments share 55%. It is proposed that the sharing formula should allow state government share 55% of VAT revenue from the current 15% to 10% sharing formula. However, local government share of the VAT revenue remains unaffected. Relatedly, basic items consumed by Nigerian households, such as food items, medical services, and pharmaceuticals, educational fees, electricity, and etc., are exempted from value-added tax. Again, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, as part of efforts to ease the administration of income taxes and levies across the Federation, there is a reasonable effort made to consolidate core tax statutes and related tax legislations. Minority Leader, resume your. Distinguished colleagues, contrary to misrepresentations in the public domain, apparently owing also, we must admit, to lack of adequate sensitization regarding the intendment of the bills under consideration, I wish to state that these bills contain innovative and people-oriented proposals as part of government's deliberate fiscal and tax reform measures to cushion the effect of ongoing broader economic policies, such as the removal of subsidy on petroleum products, renewed efforts to implement cost-reflective electricity tariffs in the power sector, and etc. on Nigerian citizens. Background to the proposed bills. Mr. President and most distinguished senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 has altered, and a plethora of federal and state enactments, as well as case law, constitute the extant legal framework for tax administration in Nigeria. While the Constitution, as a ground norm, provides for the taxing powers, cum legislative powers of the three tiers of government, there are enactments at the federal and state levels on specific taxes and levies, which the courts have given judicial recognition in the course of exercising its adjudicatory powers under our Constitution. Apart from the couples of primary federal and subnational tax statutes, there are equally other statutes that are not purely tax legislations, but nevertheless impose profound tax obligations on Nigerian citizens and other entities doing business in Nigeria. The sheer multiplicity of conflicting statutes and case law on taxes and levies in Nigeria at the federal and subnational levels is quite confounding, that makes it difficult for efficient tax administration. There is no gainsaying that the appellate court's interpretation of extant statutes has either created more confusion or generated more controversy, especially as it relates to the taxing powers of the three tiers of government, the jurisdiction of existing courts and tribunals, etc. Beyond this, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, experts had in the past harped on the need for consolidation of tax statutes in Nigeria in simple and easy language to allow seamless administration of public revenue in Nigeria. These bills seek to address some of these lapses in the existing legal and institutional framework tax administration in Nigeria. 2, specific structure and objectives of respective tax bills. The Joint Revenue Board of Nigeria Establishment Bill 2024, SB 583, is made up of 60 clauses subdivided into 7 parts and 3 schedules. Its specific objectives, as can be gleaned from Clause 1 of the bill, is to A, provide the legal and institutional framework for the harmonization and coordination of revenue administration in Nigeria. B, provide a mechanism for efficient dispute resolution. C, promote the rights of taxpayers. Accordingly, novel provisions in SB 583 include establishment of the Joint Revenue Board under Part 2, Clauses 3 to 22, to replace the Joint Tax Board, establishment of the Tax Appeal Tribunal with some level of autonomy under Part 5, Clauses 23 to 34, and establishment of the Office of the Tax Ombudsman to facilitate investigation of tax complaints made by taxpayers. 3, the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill 2024, SB 584. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the bill is made up of 43 clauses subdivided into 6 parts and 3 schedules. The objective of the bill is to provide for the legal, institutional, and regulatory framework for administration of taxes and revenue under any law made by the National Assembly, and to account for such taxes and revenue collected. Key novel provision is the establishment of the Nigeria Revenue Service with broader powers over revenues accruing to the Federation. The implication is that unlike the FIRS, the NRS will be more involved in collection and administration of all taxes and duties accruing to the Federation, including those in the petroleum sector and those administered currently by other federal government agencies, such as the Nigerian Ports Authority, the NIMASA, and the Nigerian Customs Service, etc. The Nigeria Tax Administration Bill 2024, SB 585, on its own is made up of 144 clauses, subdivided into 5 chapters, with some of the chapters further subdivided into parts as follows. The specific objectives of the bill, as outlined under Clause 1, is to provide for uniform procedures for a consistent and efficient administration of tax laws in order to facilitate tax compliance by taxpayers and optimize tax revenues. Specifically, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the bill provides assessment, collection, and accounting for particular taxes and levies by the 3 tiers of government, especially on matters of income tax, capital gains, and etc. There are novel provisions, including copious provisions that allow for automation in tax collection and integration of technology into tax administration, harmonization of tax offenses and penalties to promote enforcement and compliance, introduction of installment tax payment, model under certain conditions and introduction of the principle of derivation in the sharing of value-added tax revenue, unlike the current arrangement that relies on the places of VAT remittance, which is usually the headquarters of service and goods suppliers, and not locations across the country where the goods and services are actually consumed. The current arrangement, unlike what is proposed, unduly favors the most industrialized states in Nigeria, to the detriment of states where such goods and services are actually consumed, but are not lucky to host the headquarters of these service and good suppliers. The Nigeria Tax Bill 2024 SB 586. The Nigeria Bill, this bill is essentially a compendium of taxes and levies charged in Nigeria and payable by individuals and companies. Accordingly, when passed, will repeal about 11 existing federal and state statutes, since all of them have been consolidated, updated, and simplified under this bill. The reforms also include a more progressive personal income tax system with reduced rates for low-income earners, for instance, those earning under 800,000 naira, annually payable on personal income tax. Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, in the considered wisdom of this Senate, following our discussions in the executive session or the closed-door session, it was resolved that, as we promised in plenary yesterday, we will still bring the tax team and experts who came to address us in plenary yesterday back for us to ask them questions. But again, like I said, in the wisdom of the Senate, we feel in bringing them back, they should be brought back actually to the public hearing, where not only senators, but other stakeholders, as well as members of public, will have a chance to ask them questions. And we cannot get to this stage unless this bill passes second reading, so that it is referred statutorily to the Senate Committee on Finance that will be able to organize the public hearing. So, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, these bills will be seen as part of the required legislative intervention to support ongoing fiscal and tax reform measures needed to reposition the Nigerian economy for growth and productivity. The bills will be considered with great sense of patriotism and exercise of the powers of the National Assembly under Section 59 of our Constitution regarding imposition of taxes. I therefore, Mr. President, urge my distinguished colleagues to support this bill for second reading. I so move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, I rise to second this motion on the lead debate on the Nigeria tax reforms bills and the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we have since yesterday exhaustively examined all the aspects of this tax reform bill. And in line with our legislative procedure in making laws, agreed earlier today that these bills be passed for a second reading, so that when it is referred to the appropriate committee, especially at the third reading, all the gray areas and areas of concern by Nigerians and some concerned citizens should be addressed appropriately at that level. And I think at this point that I will urge all my colleagues to support the second reading of this bill so that we pass it to the relevant committees, having exhaustively debated on this matter earlier on today. I so submit, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mohammed Sani Musa, representing Niger East. My dear colleagues, this bill, I believe, is coming at a time when Nigeria is trying to reform its economy so that we meet the standards that other advanced economies have reached. As a committee which I chair, that's Finance Committee, I know we are going to be reposed with responsibilities. And our responsibilities, we are going to do it and to discharge it to the best interest of Nigerians. What these bills entails is good for this country. And anywhere we see it necessary, and if it's necessary, to do the needful in terms of giving Nigeria a legislation that will carry every sector of this country, we will do it. We will give these bills all the necessary legislative processes it requires, such as public hearing. We'll call for memoranda from all sectors. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, regional groupings, we will call for memoranda. And then at the end of the day, we will do a retreat with experts, tax experts and consultants, so that we will be able to give this bill the real legislative procedure in passing it. So I believe that our distinguished colleagues will give this bill the necessary support to pass the second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Siraki Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. President, and my dear colleagues, Henry Siraki Dixon, Bayelsa West. Mr. President, I rise to lend my voice to the motion that these bills introduced by the executive as part of a comprehensive tax reform in our country be read a second time. In doing so, Mr. President, I remind us that by our rules, at this stage, we are to discuss the general principles and not specific details and provisions. And I rise to say that I agree in general the need for a comprehensive tax reform in our country. We don't have an economy that is taxation-based and taxation-driven. It's an economy that is sometimes difficult to track, sometimes difficult to predict, and that's not the best for us. In our system, if you look at the tax ratio, even in African countries, our tax reliance is just about 7% or even less, 7% of our population. Compared to the GDP, the tax to GDP ratio, this country is one of the least. And that doesn't speak to progress, it speaks to stagnation and backwardness. Even the African ratio is 15% tax to GDP. And it's understandable because the founding fathers of this country based economies pre-independence on taxation, even taxing cattle. They called it jangale in the north. And people were paying. They could plan the economies. And that was when they did major things in all regions. But all of that changed, Mr. President. The moment oil was discovered in the creeks of the Niger Delta, 1957-58, Nigeria found free money in the creeks of the Niger Delta. And we left taxation, just as we left agriculture and manufacturing. So that's where we are. So the attempt by the current administration to let the governments of Nigeria, all levels, they run on tax and tax revenue is something that I fully support. I am aware that some issues have been raised, and that is legitimate. We're a country of diverse people, diverse cultures, diverse expectations, and that's the beauty and the greatness of Nigeria. We cannot expect to be a country that speaks with one voice or sees things only from one perspective. All those are legitimate observations and fears and expectations. All we're expected to do is to harness all of this and enact laws in the national interest, which I believe, following our rules, after the second reading, at the committee stage, when the public hearing is held, everybody who has anything to say will be invited to say, as the chairman of the committee has said. Now, there are issues I am concerned with. Some of these issues that have been raised are also as a result of insufficient consensus building and consultation prior to the introduction. And it's understandable, as a former governor, why some governors express concern at the neck. That is legitimate. That consultation should have taken place. And I believe between now and at the end of our legislative activities, more consultations will happen. But that does not detract from the essence of the legislations that have been sent to us. For example, there is emphasis on derivation according to taxation. And the attempt now is to encourage states to be productive. And why not? A situation where states will abandon their core responsibility to create an enabling environment, attract investment, promote economic activities, so that that state can boost its revenues. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I am concerned from where I come from the experiences you and I have, where oil workers are flown into oil platforms in Akwa Ibom, in Eket and Ibono, in Akwa Ibom, or flown into Bonny and other areas in River State, or flown into Brass in Bayelsa and in southern Niger area, and in Delta State in Ogola and Foropa, Ogola and Fokadus. We're interested that this is an opportunity for the payee taxes from those oil workers to be calculated and paid to the oil-producing states where those activities are generated, as against being calculated and paid to where the head office is located, as has been the case, where the tax is registered. And from the general principles underlying this bill, as I explained yesterday, there is a move and a commitment by the executive to address that issue of revenue derivation, to ensure that payee taxes, even for the oil workers that are flown in and flown out every day other than work, or 2 days, be calculated and paid. If that is done, I think that is a good move that should be supported. The other area in VAT, according to derivation, when we get to the committee stage, we'll look at the specific details. But there's nothing wrong in saying that the telephone calls that are made in Bayelsa or Akwa Ibom or Sokoto or Kano, the VAT on those things that are consumed be calculated and paid to those states. And we are told that that is the essence of these bills. And there's nothing wrong about it. Because VAT is a consumption tax. It's not a production tax. Those who are in the states who consume services, the VAT accruing to those should be calculated and paid So I'm sure when we look at the details, we'll see whether there's enough mechanism to guarantee transparency and accuracy in terms of administration. Those are some of the things we'll fine tune. So, Mr. President, this is a good move. And there is an effort also to reduce the burden of taxation on Nigerians. Corporate taxes by the proposal. You read the bills. There's a proposal to reduce corporate taxes from next year, reducing it from the 30% that it is currently to 27, 25%. So that is a good move. And there's also a move to remove the people at the lowest level in terms of their salaries and so on, to exempt them completely from taxation. These are good things in this bill that should be encouraged. Mr. President, it is for these and other reasons, and principally as a federalist, which I've been all my adult life, I see these bills as a move towards entrenching fiscal federalism in Nigeria, which I fully support. So, Mr. President, I use this opportunity to call on all my colleagues to agree that these bills, all four of them, should be passed for second reading to enable our committee and the experts and the general public engage in accordance with our rules. Thank you.
There's one that you did not mention. If you are traveling from Lagos, no, please sit down. If you are traveling from Lagos to Akwa Ibom, all the local government people, the tax collectors will run from the bush and block your car. And then they will ask you whether you have tire permit, whether you have exhaust permit, and they will mention that this is Onyangwe local government of Edo. As soon as you pass there, you get towards Onitsha, they will block you again and ask you for the same thing. And then they will show them, they will say, no, that one you paid for Edo, we are talking about Anambra. You move from there, you get to Ihiala. They will say, stop. What of the one for Abia? So that multiplicity, in fact, it frightens you to move on the road in Nigeria because of local government taxes. And if you don't have money in your pocket, your car will be kept there for at least 10 hours. So if the bills or any section will also address these issues of multiplicity of taxes, I think it's something that we should all look at. And I also want to remind us that we are discussing the general principles of the bills. The specifics will be looked into whenever we go for the public hearing. We'll get the experts, we'll get the traditional institution, we'll get our governors and all other stakeholders concerned to make their inputs. We will not pass anything here that will not be in the best interest of Nigerians. We believe strongly that what is good for Nigeria is what we will do. And we should at this stage even say, let's go for the second reading so that we can subject it to legislative processes. Who do I call so that I won't put any question until I hear from Senator Ndume.
Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, I'm Senator Alindume, representing Borno South. Mr. President, as you said and as we discussed, reforms is necessary if we have to move forward. Even in our lives, we look at where you are, where you want to be, and how you want to be, so that you get there. I am not against reforms. And I'm not against these reforms, tax reform. My problem is number one, the timing. The timing as it is today, when you talk about reforms to Nigerians, whether it's good or bad, they misconceive it. And as we said, I just want to add to what distinguished Senator Sekibo, Tareke Dipo said, Senator Dixon said, he talked eloquently and explained so many things. There are 4 things or 3 there. But as you said, the time for that would be at the public hearing or when we pass it second reading. But let it be on record that my problem with the bills, I've said 1, that is the timing. Number 2, the issue of derivation made the reform contagious, contaminated, and contradictory in some cases, because the Constitution has to be amended in order for some of these proposals to be effective. I'm glad we are doing constitutional review. So even if it means reviewing the Constitution, this is general principles. As you said, or as the senators decided, we should not throw away the baby with the bathwater. I would have preferred we remove the baby and throw away the water first. And that is to go with what the governors and NEC proposed, that this bill should be withdrawn so that, and they are not saying that the bill should be killed. No, you withdraw the bill, work on it, and then submit it to the National Assembly again after getting the buy-in of the governors and NEC, and even our traditional rulers. Mr. President, let's be honest to ourselves. If we sit down here, work on these bills, assuming as it is now, because the governors have not come out publicly to change their position. The traditional rulers have not sat down publicly to change their position. NEC have not sat down to change their position. And for me, as I said, I looked at the bill. The bill contains so many good things, but these 2 things, derivation and VAT, even though you say it will be addressed at the public session, it's not something that many of us will agree to it. You started by saying, we are going to negotiate, which is good, and it's coming from you. But why don't we negotiate first before we come out to take a position? The tax, something that looks attractive, may not necessarily be that. Because if you transfer or you move people from lower income from VAT, and then you increase their taxes, the corporate taxes, the person that is manufacturing that goods will now transfer the VAT cost to it. So it means you gave him with the right hand, and it was taken, or it's taken on the left hand. Secondly, the corporate tax you are talking about, when you remove the lower income, which is good, but then in the bill, it's a 50 million to billion, 25%. They reduce it from 30% to 25%. If a small person or medium enterprising company makes up to 50 million per year, and you are charging him the same percentage with companies that are earning billions and declaring billions of profit. I give you an example back. So the person that is in Norway managing to manufacture shoes, and his turnover turns up to be 50 million, you are charging him the same with somebody that is sitting down with pen and paper. Read it, and you see.
Senator Ndume, you have 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to conclude.
I don't know whether that is fair, Mr. President.
On the general principles of the bills, you have 30 seconds.
So, in conclusion, Mr. President, The third problem I mentioned, if the people, through the governors, and then the NEC and the traditional rulers say that the bill should be withdrawn, make some necessary amendments, and then bring it back, and we can pass it in 24 hours. That is my position, Mr. President.
Noted. Distinguished Senator Mongoro.
Distinguished President of the Senate, good senators, with all due respect to distinguished Senator Alin Dume, who was my minority leader in the House of Reps, a leader in the Senate, and immediate first whip of the Senate with all the cognate experience of lawmaking. I beg to disagree with him that this bill should be withdrawn first and consultation should be held with the Nigerian Governors Forum and traditional rulers. We have a procedure which is clearly and unambiguously stated in our rule book for the process of lawmaking. And the Constitution, in a very clear and unambiguous terms, gave us the powers to regulate our proceedings. Section 60. And pursuant to Section 60 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, we gave these rules to ourselves in order to guide our proceedings. And then the process of lawmaking is very clear and unambiguous as per this book, that second reading, it will be now transmitted to the committee for public hearing. In the course of the public hearing, Nigerians of all walks of life, of all groups, will come and aggregate, including the governors and traditional rulers, are free to come and ventilate their opinion.
And Governors Forum.
Yes, that's why, including the Governors Forum and traditional rulers, are free to come and ventilate their opinion as to the pros and the cons of the bill before the public hearing, so that our committee will now look at the various submissions, aggregate it, and then bring it for clause by clause consideration. So this procedure that Senator Ndume, with all this due respect, has suggested is foreign to the process of legislative exercise, and therefore is purely academic and should not be considered.
But not rhetoric.
Not rhetoric. It's an academic exercise, not worthy of legislative consideration.
Okay.
It's an academic exercise not worthy of legislative consideration. So, Mr. President, having said that, my contribution on the general principles of the bill is that this bill, as it is proposed, I am particularly on the issue of reducing the tax burden on Nigerians, removing VAT on food, medicals, education, pharmaceuticals, and electricity were exempted from VAT. So this bill is noble, it's pro-people, because it's trying to reduce the tax burden on Nigerians, so that it is the big earners that are going to be taxed for the purpose of. Then with regard to the issue of pay, people that are not earning more than the minimum wage are also exempted from pay as you earn tax. This will also go a long way in reducing the tax burden on Nigerians. And then with regard to the issue of company income tax that was reduced from 30 to 25%, it's equally good, because that will give an opportunity for the companies to employ more Nigerians and what have you. So on that general principle, Mr. President, distinguished senators, I support that this bill should go for second reading.
Distinguished colleagues, is it the view of the Senate that these bills be allowed to go for the second reading? Those in support say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. These bills are now referred to the Committee on Finance to revert to the Senate in 6 weeks. The Chairman Finance, the bills will go now into second reading. Before the clerk does so, I want you to note what your colleagues have said, that all the concerned groups in the country must be invited to the public hearing. The Governors Forum, the traditional institution, the CSOs, the NGOs, and all concerned Nigerians. So that at the end, before it comes back here, for us to do further consideration clause by clause, Nigerians would have had the opportunity of making input and then deleting some sections, including some, reducing some of the provisions and adding some, and then at the end you bring them back for our consideration. So the Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, I bill for an act to establish the Joint Revenue Board, the Tax Appeal Tribunal, and the Office of the Tax Ombud for the harmonization, coordination, and settlement of disputes arising from revenue administration in Nigeria and for other related matters 2024, SB 583, second reading. Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to repeal the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act number 13, 2007, and enact the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Act to establish the Nigerian Revenue Service, charged with the powers of assessment, collection of, and accounting for revenue accruement to the government of the Federation, and for related matters 2024, 584, second reading. Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for the assessment, collection of, and accounting for revenue accruing to the Federation, federal, state, and local government, prescribe the powers and function of tax authorities, and for related matters 2024, SB 585, second reading. Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to repeal certain acts on taxation and consolidate the legal frameworks relating to taxation and enact the Nigeria Tax Act to provide for taxation of income, transactions, and instruments, and for related matters 2024 SB 586, second reading.
Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to establish the Joint Revenue Board, the Tax Appeal Tribunal, and the Office of the Tax Ombudsman for the harmonization, coordination, and settlement of disputes arising from the revenue administration in Nigeria and for related matters 2024, second reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to establish the Joint Revenue Board, the Tax Appeal Tribunal, and the Office of the Tax Ombudsman for the harmonization, coordination, and settlement of disputes arising from revenue administration in Nigeria and for related matters 2024, second reading taken, and now referred to the Committee on Finance for further consideration. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to repeal the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act number 13, 2007, and enact the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act to establish the Nigerian Revenue Service charged with powers of assessment, collection of, and accounting for revenue accruable to the government of the Federation and for related matters 2024, second reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to provide for the assessment, collection of, and accounting for revenue accruing to the Federation accounts, states and local governments, prescribe the powers and functions of tax authorities, and for related matters, 2024. Second reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to repeal certain acts on taxation and consolidate the legal frameworks relating to taxation and enact the Nigeria Tax Act to provide for taxation of income, transactions, and instruments, and for related matters, 2024. Second reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, the four bills read so far are now referred to the Senate committees on finance, Senate committees on finance for further legislative actions, including public hearings, collation of all views, opinions, tinker with, delete, add, subtract, and revert to this August Assembly on or before 6 weeks. Leader of the Senate. Let me thank my colleagues for this, for the considerations of these executive bills, and also thank all those who contributed, particularly the fact that even though we have not gone into specifics, some of my colleagues were able to bring out certain good aspects of the bills and also certain contentious issues in the bills, and to let the public know that the process of lawmaking is not about presenting a bill and then withdrawing it to go and consult with the public before coming back to the Senate. The process of lawmaking is referring the bill to the public for public hearing and then consultation before bringing back to the Senate for passage into law. As a matter of fact, this is just the beginning of the journey of these bills. The public is now invited. Even those who came yesterday to give us lectures are going to be part of those in the public hearing. Then all the ministers involved will be part of those at the public hearing. The governors will be part of those. The governors do not make laws. Therefore, the governors forum cannot make laws in the neck. They will come to the National Assembly and be part of the public hearing. And at the end, their views will be consolidated, taking into account before the bills are now brought back in a report by the Senate Committee on Finance for our further consideration, clause by clause. And thereafter, we pass, we go ahead to read the bill, we pass it for third reading before we transmit to Mr. President for assent. So the process is just beginning. And I thank all of you for your concerns. I thank all of you for your contributions. And I hope this will bring all the confusion to an end. The distinguished Senate leader, in view of the time, you may wish to move that we suspend every other item on the other paper for the day to consolidate on the main issue of the tribute to our late icon, the former Senate President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, distinguished late Senator Joseph Wires. Move a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, and very distinguished colleagues. Mr. President, I rise to move that we do step down other items on the order paper, including MTEP, to the next legislative day to allow us take the only business of the day, which is the valedictory session in honor of late distinguished Senator Joseph Wires. I so move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I support the motion that in view of the mood of the Senate, that we suspend all other legislative actions on the order paper except the validating session for our former Senate President, Dr. Joseph Wires. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, the motion has been moved and seconded. Those in support of the motion that we revert to the day of tribute say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate, the motion includes suspension of our rules to allow strangers to enter the chambers.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, I rise to move the motion for the suspension of Order 12 of our rules in respect of floor privileges to allow strangers to come into chamber, including the family of late distinguished Senator Joseph Wires. I so move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I support the motion that we suspend our rules to allow strangers into the chamber. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in support of the motion that we allow strangers to enter the chambers by suspending our rules, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Sergeant at Arms. Distinguished colleagues, let me first apologize to members of the late icon, Dr. Joseph Wyers, who had to wait for us to handle some urgent national matters before being brought into the chambers. And to say that we are delighted that you were able to make it here to bring him to where he presided over for years when many of us were still at the political, when we were still obtaining political tutelage. So the Deputy Senate President.
Order, please. We're in a solemn session. Order, please. We're in a solemn session.
Distinguished senators, we have before us members of the late Dr. Joseph Wyers' family, and then we have his remains outside there for the Senate to pay formal respect. Many have already gone to pay their respect, and many of them are already outside now paying their respect. Leader of the Senate, you may wish to commence the day of tribute.
Distinguished, Mr. President, very distinguished senators, and of course.
Just before you go further, let me recognize our colleague, distinguished Senator Lieli Moke, distinguished senator, former governor, former this, former that. We are long time no see. You are welcome, but God continue to keep you for us. Welcome to the Senate. Welcome to your chambers. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the business of the day is a valedictory session in honor of the late distinguished Senator Joseph Wyers, who lived from 21st of May 1941 to the 30th day of November 2021. Mr. President, distinguished senators, I want to say that we also have in attendance, in addition to distinguished Senator Leon Moke, who has already been recognized by Mr. President, we have the family, the immediate and some extended members of family of distinguished Senator Joseph Wyers. And at this point, I am moving that we hereby commence the valedictory session in his honor. Mr. President, I so move, and I'll be back with my lead debate.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that this Senate commences the valedictory session for the former Senate President, Dr. Joseph Wyers. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, the motion has been moved and seconded. Those who are in support of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The aye is have it. The procedure after the few speeches have just been corrected by the clerk of the Senate is that because he was a presiding officer, only the principal officers would lead the family to go round body. Other senators will stand and watch, not allowed to go round. That is the only aspect of it now, because he was a presiding officer of this chamber. Only principal officers We'll do the filing. Yes.
Mr. President, very distinguished senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Senate notes with sadness, but in total submission to the will of God Almighty, the demise of His Excellency Senator Joseph Wires, former president of the Nigerian Senate in the Second Republic, who died on Tuesday, 30th November 2021, at the age of 80. The Senate further notes that distinguished Senator Joseph Wires was born in Basang Obodo, Cross River State, on 24th May 1941, and attended Dennis Memorial Grammar School, Onitsha. He went to the United Kingdom, where he studied at the higher Tottenham Technical College, London, the West Bromwich College of Commerce, Science and Technology, Birmingham, and Aston University. Returning to Nigeria, he worked as a manager and controller from 1960 to 1969 for several companies of the Society of International Affairs at the Lincoln University in the United States of America. Senate observes also that distinguished Senator Joseph Wires joined the federal government of Nigeria in 1969 to 1972. He was Commissioner for Transport, Southeastern State, now Akwa Ibom and Cross River States, from 1972 to 1974. Senate is aware that with the transition to civil rule in 1979, distinguished Senator Joseph Wires was elected to the Senate on the National Party of Nigeria platform and subsequently elected President of the Senate by his colleagues in chamber. He represented the Ogoja Senatorial District alongside distinguished Senator Joseph Okwa Ansa, who represented Calabar Senatorial District. Senate recalls that in the lead up to the 1983 elections, distinguished Senator Wires was the leader of the National Party of Nigeria Lagos Group that supported the change of government in Cross River State in opposition to the Home Front led by the incumbent governor, then Clement Isong. Senator Wires left office along with other members of the Shagari administration following a military coup d'etat on New Year's Eve of 1983 and went into exile. He returned in 1987 and was held in political detention from 1987 to 1988. Senate is aware that distinguished Senator Wires was the deputy chairman of the 1994-1995 National Constitutional Conference Commission that organized and midwifed the National Conference itself. The Senate is aware also that distinguished Senator Wires was a founding member of the All People's Party. He later joined the People's Democratic Party in 2001. He was a strong believer in true federalism as the only solution to Nigeria's structural as well as socio-economic problems, which had been manifested in the Nigerian Civil War. In October 2003, Senator Wires spoke out against the ongoing local council reforms by the federal government describing them as unconstitutional. Senate is further aware that distinguished Senator Wires was appointed chairman of the Board of Trustees of the South-South People's Assembly. In January 2009, he described post-election petitions to electoral tribunals as senseless, reckless, and time-wasting. In January 2010, Senator Wires advocated that Vice President Goodluck Jonathan be authorized to act as President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria pending the return of President Umaru Yar'Adua, who had been incapacitated by illness for a while. Senate is also convinced that Senator Wires was an eminent and committed leader, a perfect gentleman, a grassroots politician par excellence, and a nationalist. His contributions to democracy and good governance remains unparalleled and will make his footprint indelible in the sands of time. And Senate regrets that his demise is a great loss to his family, the people of Cross River North, and the government of Cross River State. Senate accordingly resolves to 1. Observe a minute silence in honor of late distinguished Senator Joseph Wires. 2. Urge the Senate to fully participate in his burial. And 3. Send a condolence message to commiserate with the family, the good people of his constituency, and the government of Cross River. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I so submit.
Let me start from maybe hearing from one or two people before myself and the Deputy Senate President will speak. Distinguished Senator Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. President, and my dear colleagues, and our guests, family, including former Governor, senior colleague, D.L. Moke, Excellency Usia, family. I'm Henry Siraki Dixon, Senator representing Bayelsa West. And Mr. President, I know that a number of other senators will make comments, particularly from the South-South, and in particular, the senators from the great state of Cross River State. But I rise to make comments not just for myself. I rise to make brief remarks on behalf of the senators from the South-South zone of our great country. President, I rise also to associate with the sentiments already expressed by the leader in his lead debate when he recounted the various ways and manners our departed elder statesman served and gave his best to this country. He was a great family man, a great servant of the people, and he served man and God in his lifetime. There's no doubt from all we have heard and all that we know that in his lifetime he gave his very best. Notably, as we all know, he had an opportunity to preside over this chamber in the Second Republic, an assignment he carried on with dignity to the best of his ability. We have also been told how thereafter he led the South People's Assembly. And for all that, we want to thank our departed leader, elder statesman and father, for all that he did for our people, peoples of Nigeria and the peoples of the South. In 1979, I don't believe that anyone here in this chamber was his contemporary in the Senate in 1979. But that is not to say that we are not aware and we do not know of his records of service. In the best traditions of the peoples of the South, best traditions of working with friends and allies to build a united and strong and indivisible Nigeria, Joseph Wya's His Excellency epitomized that. Worked with other leaders, late Chief Melford Okilo, Dr. Clement Esong, now Gbemudia, Chief Anene, all of them now of blessed memory, and several others, and built bridges of unity, of peace, and of understanding, for which the peoples of the South and the leaders of the South are well known for. And we thank all Nigerians and his contemporaries at the time who found him worthy to be elected unanimously as president of the Senate at that time. And we thank all those who supported him. And there's no doubt that he stabilized with his colleagues the government of President Alhaji Shehu Shagari, who also ran an inclusive government, carried all our people along. Joseph Wyatt did that to the best of his ability and paid also the price that comes with political service. Now it's no more, and all those commentaries at that time that sought to belittle and demonize them, not only him, we heard of several things. And we all know what happened when Shagari passed. We know what happened when Akinloye passed. We know what happened when Ekweme passed. We know now what has happened. These were people, a generation. They belong to a generation. His Excellency Joseph Wyatt, Senator, belonged to a generation that gave selfless, dedicated, and honest service. You could disagree with positions they took, but it's not in doubt at all. And I think that Nigerians are wiser now. So before I sit, I want to call on all the members of the political class to borrow a leaf from the life and the worthy service and the sacrifices His Excellency Senator Joseph Wyatt and all their contemporaries, Shagari, all of them made, serving honestly and leaving the world behind only with records of their service. So on this note, that I, on behalf of the senators from the South, join the president and the leadership of the Nigerian Senate to convey our collective condolences to the family of our departed elder statesman, leader, and father. Convey our condolences to the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who has lost a worthy Nigerian leader and elder statesman, and to the government of my good friend, His Excellency Senator Basiotu, governor of Cross River State, who has lost an eminent elder statesman and father. And to say that we pray that God should grant the family the fortitude with which to bear what is clearly an irreparable loss, and also grant the departed soul of our leader and elder statesman eternal repose in Jesus' name.
The floor is yielded to Senator Jarigwe Agam Jarigwe, the senator representing the central zone of the late President of the Senate, Senator Joseph White. But before then, let me recognize members of the House of Representatives that are here to witness this session. You are welcome to the Senate. Senator Jarigwe, you have the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the wife of the late former Senate President, Dr. Joseph Waters, the children, my former governor, Senator Leah Limoke, members of the House of Reps here. I rise to pay my tribute to the late former Senate President. Dr. Joseph Waters was a statesman in his own class, a class of his own. At home, he was a homeboy with the people. The people believed in him. He was always sure of the next elections because he rendered service to his people and he knew his people would stand by him. In Cross River State, he remains a legend amongst politicians. I don't think the generations after him have been able to break his record. The records are there for all to see. In Nigeria, he was a nationalist, personified. Because he was a nationalist, he decided to speak all the major languages, very fluent in Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo. He was a philanthropist in all ramifications. People that benefited from him and attest to it. As presiding officer in this red chamber, he espoused stoic principles that enabled him to preside over the Senate without controversy. Today, we pay tributes to him, and we emulate his virtues. And we pray that his soul reposes in the bosom of the Lord. I want to use this opportunity to thank the government of Cross River State for doing us the honor of honoring our own with a state funeral. I want to implore the family, the wife, to be strong. He has left a legacy that transcends his generation, and we should learn from that and uphold his virtues moving forward. Thank you very much, and may the soul of Dr. Joseph Waters rest in perfect.
Senator Asuko Ekpanyo, the floor is yielded to you.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. My name is Asuko Ekpanyo, Senator representing Cross River South. Taking the time to pen down a tribute to the statesman, the late Senate President, Senator Dr. Joseph Waters. It is with a profound emotion that I stand before you today to honor the life and legacy of one of the most respected Nigerians I have ever known. While his passing leaves an irreplaceable void, it also fills me with immense pride to pay tribute to a man whose life was a testament of service, courage, and statesmanship, Senator Dr. Joseph Waters. Though his tenure as the president of the Nigerian Senate from 1979 to 1983 occurred before my time, his impact continues to inspire those of us who walk in his footsteps. From our earliest awareness of leadership and governance, his name has stood tall among the giants of Cross River State. Dr. Wyas's political journey was marked by an uncommon dexterity and profound wisdom. His emergence as Senate President in 1979, in the infancy of the Nigeria's Second Republic, was no small feat, and I have a deep appreciation for the complexity and delicate balancing of the interests that must have had to be made in attaining such a position. One of his most enduring legacies lies in his pivotal role in the development of the 1979 Constitution. This document laid the groundwork for the democratic governance we continue to build upon today. His advocacy for legislative independence remains a cornerstone of our democracy, underscoring the vital role of the legislature as a check on executive powers. Beyond his legislative achievements, Dr. Wyas was a proud son of Cross River State, championing the development of our region and uplifting the voices of his people. Today, as I humbly represent the Southern Senatorial District of Cross River State, I am acutely aware that I stand on the shoulders of giants like him. The sacrifices he made, often in turbulent and uncertain times, paved the way for those of us who now carry the torch of service. To his beloved family, I offer my deepest condolences. I pray that the Almighty God will continue to comfort you and strengthen you during this difficult time. Take solace in the fact that your patriarch lived a life of immense significance, a life that taught countless many others and helped shape the course of our nation's history. May his soul rest in perfect peace, and may his legacy continue to inspire us all to strive for a better, more united, and prosperous Nigeria. Thank you, Mr. President.
Let me call on distinguished Senator Ethan William, former Speaker across River State House of Assembly. The floor is to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Senator Ethan Williams. I represent Cross River Central. Before I continue, Dr. Joseph Wire represented Ogoja Central District, made up of the present Cross River Central and Cross River North. So he represented me, represented my people. Mr. President, Dr. Wires, as is fondly called in Cross River, Joe, is a household name. The first Nigerian Senate President to act as the President of Nigeria for 16 days. It is on record. We need to note that. That was when the President then, Joe Shagari, and Dr. Alex Ekweme traveled out of the country. He acted for 16 days. He became the President of Nigeria as a Senate President. Not only that, he's a man that is fearless. He speaks to power, not minding his position. When he spoke against the local government reforms then and said it's unconstitutional, it was unthinkable then. And also, he's a man with history. The very first to do a second term as Senate President. A feat. Only, I think, David Mark that has tried, but Joseph Wires, the great Cross Riverian, the way, as it's fondly called in Cross River, did it first. This is a man with style, with a white hair somewhere, that if he moves class. Was able to control the house. Joe was not just only the Senate President. He's a man being loved by everybody. And for me, it would be unfair if we don't honor him. But today, we have that opportunity as a Senate to honor him. He speaks all languages, as we have told. He also speaks fluently French. A true Nigerian, a detribalized Nigerian. A man who believes in zoning, the principle of zoning, and plays a role that equity is only when you give opportunity to all the zones in leadership. And that's today we are all benefiting from. So I use this opportunity to say thank you, the Senate, for honoring our own. Thank you, our family in Cross River State, for coming to say farewell to our great hero. I will not fail to thank my former governor, a man that brought me to politics, who is here, clearly Moke, my father. Thank you so much for being here. And I use this opportunity to say again, thank you for producing somebody like me and making me to be a part in what we are experiencing today. And for my colleagues, even in the House of Assembly that are also here today as House of Reps, I say welcome to this chamber. Thank you so much. For the senators, you're welcome to Cross River State today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Etan William. Federal Senator, I am no longer Speaker of the River State, Cross River State House of Assembly, right? You work for the entire country now. Let me now call on Senator Oji Uzo Kalu, the former governor of Abia State. You have the floor, but we are going to allocate you only 2 minutes because others want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to use this opportunity to welcome Senator Leo Imoke, my in-law, family of Dr. Joseph Wires. I think the closest person in this room that know Dr. Joseph Wires is apart from the family. And the family knows why. Because where I live in Adeleke Adedoyi, Victoria Island, my house is in between Dr. Abi's house, and the next was Dr. Joseph Wires. So every evening, I used to sit with this humble and well-cherished man, a man that was humble from his mother's womb, and a man that can give all he has to anybody. I met this man in 1990 when he started staying in Adeleke. And one evening, one of former Nigerian president, still a president, came in my house and Dr. Joseph Wires came. And he said, "Are you the one living here?" I said, "Yes, sir." Because then he was living in front and Dr. Mike Adeduga was living opposite him, the same Adeleke Adedoyi, and David Mark, actually. So we started being friends. Every morning he said, "Young man, please sit down, let us eat." I go to his house to eat breakfast. I go to his house on Saturdays. A man that will be reflected to be a Nigerian par excellence. A man that served this nation with all humility. A man that gives everything he has or he was having to anybody that he likes. I want to condole the family because these things happen. I usually don't celebrate the death. Once people die, my own father, when he died, we buried him the same day. We don't even talk about going to celebrate anybody because death comes and it goes. But it has happened. He was a statesman. For a man to die and be brought to these hallowed chambers means that he has served his constituency and the nation. Mr. President, this is a man that if we start talking about, we cannot finish this tomorrow morning. This is a man that likes to welcome people. This is a man that likes to give whatever that is his pocket and his house to anybody. A man that cherishes good life. I'm sure some of his children who were there in Adeleke Adedoyi must know what I'm saying. But they must have very small also. I was very young when I met Dr. Wires. Dr. Wires is a friend, or he was a friend to all Nigerians. He was a friend to the MPN because I used to remember him when they used to come to Aba. It was very small during Jagare, when they come on campaign. All my family were MPN. And I know that is the most loved by the president. But President Shagari was very often, very eager to speak to him whenever they sleep in Aba for 2-3 days for campaign. He was a man that loves Cross Riverians, and he gave his life for them. According to the stories he told me, that he worked for the state, he worked for Akwa Ibomans, he worked for everybody, and he worked for the South, and he worked for the Southern Nigeria. He speaks Igbo so fluently. He was speaking Igbo so fluently with me that I cannot even think that a man is not from Onitsha, unless when he says, "Oh, Imakwanambo Cross River," that I will know is from Cross River. So I want to urge my colleagues to join us in celebrating this man. This should not be mourning. There's nothing like mourning because very accomplished man. He accomplished what life should be. He's celebrating this man while he's on the ground, on the grave, that God will give his family the mind to bear the loss of his life. Mr. President, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I feel, although it's supposed, when anybody who dies is the will of God, I feel like crying, but I can't because we will not cry for the dead. It's gone and it's gone. God will take his mind through Christ our Lord.
The floor is now yielded to the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Your Excellency Senator Ria Imoke, the family of our deceased patriot. Mr. President, I want to think that if we want to say everything that we know about our departed father, uncle, husband, friend, 24 hours in this chamber will definitely not be enough. At times like this, people say that no one says anything bad about the dead. But I know from my hindsight that what we are saying about the former president of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is out of a genuine consideration from our observations of his life. Like some of us here, I was privileged to have come across him in the Second Republic as the president of the Senate. Then I was a fresh university graduate employed in the National Assembly, Tafawa Balewa Square in Lagos. And my principal, Senator Amebute, was the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance and Appropriation. And frequently they will come together, sometimes in my presence. And on one particular occasion, Senator Amebute asked our patriot, who is in the diaspora? Is it you or me? Because the assumption then was that from the Cross River part that he came from and our part were one and the same people, except for little differences in the dialects. And so that is how homely, how amiable Senator Wires can be to you. All smiles, every time, all smiles. And a very committed Nigerian presiding over the Nigerian Senate at a time when Nigeria was struggling to get its foothold on democracy and procedures of democracy. It therefore can be said at this point, aside the founding fathers of democracy in Nigeria, to be the founding father of the new generation of Democrats at that time. And you know, the Second Republic ushered in the fresh air of democracy in Nigeria. And so he anchored that fresh air. And we can rightly therefore say that he is part of the founders of this democracy that we're enjoying today, this hallowed chamber. And so, like General Yakubu Gowon will say, All the world's a stage, quoting from Shakespeare. We all human beings have our entrances and exits. Otherwise, from the faces that I see here, I'm sure the children and the family would have loved that he is alive with them today, that he can live with them as loved ones for eternity. That God configures for every human being a time in this our existential journey. And so this time is the time for the exit of our revered leader. And I want to urge the family to take solace in the fact that the man has lived a very eventful life, he has lived a very impactful life, and he has affected the sensibilities of virtually all Nigerians up to this stage. And therefore, the only thing that can be done to leave his legacy is to walk the ways that he had walked, that all Nigerians respect till tomorrow. May God console you.
Senator Salisu Shwaib Afolabi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Shoaib Afolabi Salisu. I represent Ogun Central Senatorial District. And with the leave of the Senate leader, I will also speak as the Secretary of Southwest Senators Caucus. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I only have 3 things to say about the man from whom we are gathered today. And I will start with a regret that I never had the opportunity.
Can you hold a minute? Leader, will you please move a motion for the extension of time?
Mr. President, very distinguished senators, pursuant to Order 8, Sub 3 of our rules, I rise to move for extension of time to enable the Senate sit beyond 3 p.m. to finish the business of the day. I so move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I support the motion that the Senate extends its time beyond 3 o'clock to enable the Senate to conclude the business of the day. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, the motion has been moved and seconded that we do extend time for us to conclude the business of the day. Those in support of the motion has moved, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Yes, Deputy Senate President.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. Oh, sorry, he has the floor.
Did you conclude? You mean you knew the wires?
Mr. President, distinguished